giving you everything you need to fight the Trump administration. This is The Bill Press Show, live at youtube.com/The Bill Press Show.
I believe Stormy Daniels. Hey, what do you say, everybody? Great to see you on this Monday, March 26th. The Bill Press Show, live from Washington, D.C., our nation's capital, where over 800,000 people turned out on Saturday to march for our lives and to demand some common sense solutions to the gun violence problem that is raging across this country. Hello, hello. What a weekend. What a weekend full of activity and news, and Donald Trump firing another couple of people before they were, well, it's kind of hard to fire them before they got hired, but anyhow, that's just part of the tumult and the chaos in the Trump White House. So good to see you today. I hope you had a great weekend and were able to get out wherever you are in this great land of ours and participate in a one of the March for Our Lives events. Over 800 of them around the country and around the globe. I got a photo yesterday from a good friend of mine who was addressing a rally, anti-gun violence, a ban on assault weapons rally in Naples, Florida, in the heartland, the reddest part of the state of Florida. So it's happening. These kids have had an impact, and they are going to make a difference, finally. Look forward to talking to you about all the news of the day and hearing from you about, the big Stormy Daniels interview. Come on, you know you stayed up to watch it. You know you did. I hope you did. And about the big March for Our Lives and your experience. Send us your comments on Twitter, @BP Show. @BP Show, we want to hear from you. But first,
this is the Full Court Press.
All righty, just a couple of other stories making news. Bill, the Final Four is set. You didn't do a bracket, right? I didn't do a bracket.
No, none of us did.
Well, Villanova, Kansas, Michigan, and Loyola Chicago.
Yes.
Loyola Chicago is snuck in there. Now they are riding the wave, led by their 98-year-old team chaplain.
God
Sister
is on their
Jean.
side.
Yeah, exactly.
Sister Jean,
she's got to be their good luck charm. She is very much involved in the team's success, as they would be the first ones to say. So, that's the Final Four. Villanova, Kansas, Michigan. Those three we didn't necessarily.
And two of them are seated number one, right?
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. Those wouldn't be surprises, but it's Loyola Chicago that's the big surprise.
Yeah, right.
So we will see. That is your Final Four. By the way, it's the end of a run. The end of a run. Yes, over the weekend. Black Panther was number 2. It was not number 1 at the box office.
No.
Yes, it finally lost the number 1 position to Pacific Rim 2. Pacific Rim Uprising. It made $28 million. Black Panther only made $16.5 million this weekend. But that was enough to make Black Panther the 5th largest domestic release of all time. The 5th largest movie of all friggin' time. It beat The Avengers, which previously held that slot for Marvel, and so now Black Panther is the best Marvel movie of all time in terms of how well it did. And finally, right here in Washington, D.C., it was last week, just about a week ago, that we talked about how Joe DeGenova was going to be joining the Donald Trump legal team.
With his wife, Victoria Tunzing.
Yes, indeed.
It was a twofer.
Yes, indeed. Well, that is now over. That is now over. Jay Sekulow put out a statement saying the president's disappointed that conflicts prevent Joe DeGenova and Victoria Tunzing from joining the president's special counsel legal team. So they are not going to be.
I want to call BS. I want to call BS right away on that.
Go ahead.
No. They had represented some other people, but at least one of them had signed a thing saying it's okay with me if you represent Donald Trump. No, it was not conflicts. No.
All right.
According to what I've heard, the chemistry didn't happen during their meeting with Donald Trump.
Take The Bill Press Show anywhere you go. Download our free podcast, search for The Bill Press Show on iTunes, and catch the highlights from every show.
I believe Stormy Daniels. Yes, indeed, watching that interview last night, no doubt in my mind about who is telling the truth. I think all you need to know about Donald Trump is her story that he invites her, known porn star, to his room at the Beverly Hills Hotel, has sex with her, and says, "You remind me of my daughter." Oh, God. What a disgusting human being. President of the United States. Hello, everybody. What do you say on a Monday, March 26th? Great to see you today. Thank you so much for joining us. It is the Bill Press Show, and we're coming to you live from our nation's capital, Washington, D.C., with all the news of the day, such as it is here in Washington. It is Easter week, Holy Week, as they call it. Yesterday, Palm Sunday, for those who celebrate that. And this week, therefore, the Congress is out. I think this week and next, actually. I think a long two-week break. But there was certainly a lot of news before they left town, which we will be talking about with you. The big stories, of course, the march in Washington, March for Our Lives on Saturday. You bet I was there. The Stormy Daniels interview last night. Yet another shakeup in the White House, supposedly coming this week. It looks like Veterans Affairs Secretary David Shulkin, his head is going to roll next. And last Monday, a week from today, a week ago, Donald Trump announced that he was going to hire Fox commentator and Bulldog defense attorney Joe DeGenova to represent him in his dealings with Robert Mueller. That didn't last long. Before he was even hired, Donald Trump announced yesterday that he had fired or decided not to hire Joe DeGenova and his wife, Victoria Tunzing. So there we are. Again, good to have you with us. We look forward to hearing from you. Your comments on the news of the day. Lots and lots to talk about. I mean, I believe Stormy. Do you? Did you think she was credible last night? Send us your comments on Twitter at BP Show. As we come to you online on YouTube, youtube.com/The Bill Press Show, as we join you on Free Speech TV, and as we join you on the radio. In Indiana, Indiana Talks, and in the greater Chicago area on the great WCPT, April 4, mark your calendar. Keep reminding you, Frugal Muse Bookstore, 6:30 p.m. in Darien, Illinois. I'm going to be out there joining all of you for a great political rally, and we'll also talk about my new book, From the Left, Life in the Crossfire. Yep, let's start with Saturday. I have to tell you, I've been in a lot of marches in my life. I've been at a lot of protest rallies. I never saw anything like what we saw Saturday with March for Our Lives. It was incredible. They're estimating 800,000 plus here in Washington, D.C., which could make it the largest single-day political rally in the history of this capital. Bigger than the March on Washington with Martin Luther King, bigger than the Vietnam War rallies, which were the biggest yet, maybe 500,000-600,000, bigger than the Women's March on Washington, which was an estimated 500,000, and of course, bigger than Donald Trump's inauguration.
Well,
of course, he was playing golf, of course, during the whole time.
yeah.
But what was remarkable is, walking over there, a friend of mine said, "Oh, you watch these speakers. This is great, but you watch. They're going to get there, and one person's going to talk about this, another one talk about that. It's going to be this grab bag of issues. That usually happens. It did not happen Saturday. This event was so powerful because it was so focused. It was focused on gun violence and ending gun violence, and we know how. Background checks, ban on assault weapons, ban on those cop killer bullets, ban on those multiple heavy magazines. I mean, we know what the list is, and every speaker spoke to that. That was one of the things that made it so powerful. The other was there were no tired old politicians on stage. There were none of these people who have had their chance and failed. This was the youth of America, the young people of America. They designed it that way, that not one speaker would be over 21. And most of them were under 18, and they were incredible. They were short. They were like 2 or 3 minutes, maybe 5 max. I don't know whether any of them went 5 each. You saw, of course, a lot of them. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. Their message was so powerful, and the crowd was just really passionate. It was so impressive, so moving, and we talked about it so many times here. After Sandy Hook, nothing. After Pulse, nothing. After Las Vegas, nothing. Go on and on. Virginia Tech, nothing. You lose track of them. But boy, Parkland, Florida is different. It is proven already to be different, and I think with these kids, look, these kids have a lot of time ahead of them. They got a long life ahead of them, and they're not going to give up. This is their passion, and I think they're going to. I really do believe for the first time, it's not going to happen overnight. This gang, Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell, aren't going to change, but I think this is going to be the dominant issue in many races in the 2018 elections. And I think we're going to see a different Congress next year, and a Congress that is willing to move and to take some action. So for the first time in a long time, I'm feeling some hope and some good thoughts about gun safety with leaders like this. David Hogue, right? One of the most visible, if you will, of the Parkland, Florida students from Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School. Here's the important thing is, we may not be old enough yet, but you are.
The only way you can do that is by getting out and voting. If not for me, for everybody else on this stage, and every single American child out there, vote for us, vote for our future, and help us fight for our lives.
And the big message that I took away from the whole thing, in watching some of the speeches and hearing some of the people talk, it's like so many politicians for so long were able to say, there's only so much we can do. These are very complicated laws, and there are loopholes, and we tried our best, and it's just not working, and we don't really know where to go from here. And now these people are saying, look, it's your job to figure it out.
Yeah,
you've got to figure it out, and if you don't figure it out, we'll find someone who will.
Right, and David Hogue makes that point here in his in another little clip.
When politicians send their thoughts and prayers with no action, we say no more. And to those politicians supported by the NRA that allow the continued slaughter of our children and our future, I say get your resumes ready.
Damn.
And the chant that kept over and over again, people picked up this chant, vote them out, vote them out. And it was so powerful to be standing there right in front of the Capitol, right? So we're down at 3rd in Pennsylvania, look right at the foot of Capitol Hill, and you look right through the stage, and right in back of the speakers is the Capitol Dome, and their message was, vote them out, vote them out. It could not have been better staged, the message could not have been stronger, could not have been clearer. And again, that message picked up all over the country. I mean, there were rallies in places you would never think that there would be. Huge in San Francisco, huge in New York, huge in Chicago, in Atlanta, all over. Emma Gonzalez may have been the one who knocked the crowd out the most, where she started speaking and then she stopped. And she was silent. And people thought she kind of lost her way or was overcome with emotion. Then they realized what was happening. She was silent for 6.5 minutes, which is all the time it took for that crazed gunman to kill 17 people at Parkland High School and to injure so many more. She comes out of that and says, here is the message that we're sending today.
No one could comprehend the devastating aftermath or how far this would reach or where this would go. For those who still can't comprehend because they refuse to, I'll tell you where it went. Right into the ground, 6 feet deep.
Whoa.
Good God.
Good God is right. A young woman. She's a young girl. I think a grandniece of Martin Luther King, some relative of the King family, who brought back the I Have a Dream. Her name is Yolanda Renee King. I think she was about 11 years old. There were a couple of 11-year-olds who spoke, actually. Here's Yolanda King.
I have a dream that enough is enough.
I have a dream that enough is enough. Martin Luther King Jr. would be proud of her. And Cameron Kasky, he's the guy that confronted Marco Rubio at the big CNN town hall right after the shooting and asked him and pressed him to admit that he would, or to fess up and say he would take no more money from the NRA, which of course Marco Rubio refused to do. It's too bad Marco Rubio is not up for election this year. Re-election this year.
I know. I've had that thought.
Boy,
so many
we would
times.
vote him out in a flash. At any rate, Cameron Kasky is saying we're not alone today. Look at how many rallies around the country.
We take to the streets in over 800 marches around the globe and demand common sense gun laws. Today is the beginning of a bright new future for this country.
So, yes, I hope you are too. Let me know on Twitter, @BP Show. I hope you feel as good as I do about the possibility of finally turning the corner following the leadership of these students and doing our share to make sure that people are registered to vote and get out to vote and vote them out. And big story in the New York Times this morning pointing out that this could really be the turning point in the 2018 elections, particularly in the suburbs, because in the suburbs, gun safety is a very important issue and a very popular issue among suburban families, particularly among women in the suburbs. And that's where the Republicans could lose many, many seats on this issue. But, of course, it's not unanimous. You still have a-holes like Rick Santorum on CNN, who over the weekend, who said, these kids, this reminds me of, remember, Jack Kingston, another CNN contributor. Maybe CNN ought to take a look at its list of contributors and think, maybe they could follow Trump's lead here and do a little house cleaning. But at any rate, Rick Santorum, still on their payroll, who says, these kids, don't they have anything better to do?
How about kids, instead of looking to someone else to solve their problem, do something about maybe taking CPR classes or trying to deal with situations where there is a violent shooter that you can
How are they looking at other people?
By the way,
I can't get past that clip.
Whoa.
He is the dumbest person
that
to
pisses
ever
me
hold
off
office.
so much. He is I can't say
easy.
it. No. But first of all, looking for somebody else to solve their problems, that's exactly what they're not doing. That's exactly what they're not doing. These kids realize that the people that they were counting on to solve their problems haven't delivered and will not deliver, and so they've decided to take action. There has never been a student movement like this. Even, and I was part of it, the anti-Vietnam War, we were as a student, took part in it, but we didn't organize it. We didn't start it, right? We got on board. This is a student-led, student-driven, student-born movement. And the audacity of him to say something like that. And then, instead of worrying about being shot, why don't you learn how to treat people who have been shot? So let's let them shoot as many people, wound as many people. You just should be trained to stop the bleeding.
This is exactly what I was saying earlier. Like, they're just not going to stand for this type of nonsense from politicians. I know he's not a politician anymore. I'm sure he would like to
he
be.
is.
He ran for
president at least twice.
Yeah, not that long ago.
And he'll do it again.
Of course.
Yeah, right.
So,
and he's a former United States senator, and he's a total buffoon.
He should be laughed out of anywhere that he tries to appear.
Yeah,
anywhere.
Absolutely. Oh, man, at any rate. So, on the march, it was a great moment, a great day, and I was really excited to be right there in the middle of the crowd, and hope you were, wherever you live, that you were part of that movement as well on Saturday, or you're part of the movement. I hope you're able to get out on Saturday, and the movement continues, and we got to give it whatever support that we can. And then there was Stormy Daniels last night. I got to tell you, I watched the entire thing. I thought Anderson Cooper did an incredible job, and I thought she was unbelievably believable, if you follow that. I mean, she's very smart, and she was very direct. She told her story, and she admitted that she'd lied 3 times and denied that she had ever had an affair with Donald Trump. But she said, and she fessed up to that and said, I did it because I was afraid for myself and afraid for my family. But now she's decided that what she has to do is tell the truth. And I thought she was very, very convincing. And the details, I mean, she told the whole story. So it starts out with just a few clips here. He, of course, meets her at this golf tournament. And then invites her up to his room and for maybe going. She thought for dinner. She arrives. Clearly, he's not interested in dinner, and he starts by showing her. This is so. By the way, I think the whole thing that interview told us a lot more. It wasn't about Stormy Daniels. It was about Donald Trump. It told us a lot about Donald Trump, about how tacky he is, about how totally amoral he is, about how self-indulgent he is, and really about how careless and reckless and how creepy. I mean, so he starts out by showing her his picture on a magazine, on the cover of a magazine. And isn't this wonderful? And look at, do you think this is a good shot? And he's just talking about himself and bragging about being on the cover of this magazine. And she says to him, I'm paraphrasing here, but she says to him something like, does this always work for you? He said, what do you mean? She said, like talking about yourself? Does this like turn women on? Is this what you think turns women on? And she said, you know what somebody ought to do? Somebody ought to take that magazine and spank you with it.
Oh,
God. And he says, you really mean that? And she says, of course.
He turned around and pulled his pants down a little. You know, he had underwear on and stuff, and I just gave him a couple swats.
This was done in a joking manner?
Yes. And from that moment on, he was a completely different person.
Oh, God.
Yes. And so she has that little spunk to spank Donald Trump.
No.
And then he says, boy, you are special. You are different. Here's how special you are.
He's like, wow, you are special. You remind me of my daughter.
Oh.
He's like, you're smart, beautiful, and a woman to be reckoned with.
By the way, remember...
You remind me of my daughter. He's getting ready to hop in bed with this porn star who just spanked him with a magazine. You remind me of my daughter. Oh, isn't that disgusting?
I mean, people have made jokes about how much Donald Trump loves his daughter and the things that he said publicly about Ivanka, but that is gross. Like that, the fact that that's, I don't know, man.
Hey, baby, I thought you had a wife somewhere, huh? How about that? Didn't you? Isn't there? I remember hearing about somebody maybe named Melania.
Did he mention his wife or child at all in this?
I asked, and he brushed it aside, said, oh, yeah, you know, don't worry about that. We have separate rooms and stuff.
Oh, yeah, we have separate rooms and stuff. That, by the way, if you're looking for maybe a test of her authenticity, that's exactly what Karen McDougal, and I'm sure the two of them did not get together and make sure their stories were straight. That's exactly what Karen McDougal told Anderson Cooper on CNN last Thursday night, that Trump actually invited her and she had sex with him at Trump Tower, and they walk past and Trump says, oh, that's Melania's room there. Right.
By the way, there were
Trump Tower.
There were a couple of similarities between the two interviews, right?
Yeah.
When she said, he told me that, like, his line was, you're very special. Well, we had the clip the other day, Friday, I guess it was, where he said the same thing to Karen McDougal. You're very special.
Yeah.
You're very special.
So he dangled to kind of keep this affair going, according to Stormy Daniels. He dangled this that maybe she could be on The Apprentice. He suggests that, and she said, "Oh no! I mean that NBC wouldn't want me on that show." And he said, "No, I decide who goes on the show. I want you on that show because you're so special. You would be great on that show." And so throughout the relationship, and she says she kind of knew it would never happen, but he kept saying, "I'm going to make it happen. Don't worry, trust me, I'm going to make it happen." In the end, he did not make it happen, but that was sort of a lure, that he was throwing out there as to keep his sex toy and. Interested in him. And Stormy Daniels, we had heard this before. There was a report that one of the reasons that she took this money and agreed to shut up is that she was fearful for her life. She told the details of what happened. It was out in Las Vegas in the parking lot when she was getting out of a car to go to a workout session with her daughter in the car.
I was in a parking lot going to a fitness class with my infant daughter. I was taking, the seats facing backwards in the back seat, diaper bag, getting all the stuff out. And a guy walked up on me and said to me, "Leave Trump alone, forget the story." And then he leaned around and looked at my daughter and said, "A beautiful little girl. It'd be a shame if something happened to her mom." And then he was gone.
Yeah, that would put the fear of God into you. Something like that.
I would say so.
Yeah, and she said she didn't go to the police. She was just dealing with what she saw as a very serious threat to herself and to her family, and that's why she said that she ended up denying, at the request of Trump's attorneys, denying 3 times that she had this affair with Donald Trump, and she actually, at that time, she had told her story to In Touch magazine. They paid her $15,000 for it, and that's when this guy showed up and said, "Drop that story, don't talk anymore," basically, or else. Interesting, intriguing, that was left last night, a question not answered by her or by her new attorney, Michael Avenatti, is do you have any evidence of your back and forth with Donald Trump that you haven't told us yet?
You don't want to say one way or the other if you have text messages or other items.
My attorney has recommended that I don't discuss those things.
Yeah, but her attorney did show a DVD in his safe and said, if one picture is worth 1,000 words, imagine what this DVD is.
I've got to know what's on that DVD.
I do too.
I got to know what's on it.
I'll tell you one thing. I don't believe he's bluffing. I don't believe he's bluffing. Do you? He's too big an attorney, and he's up against too big a guy, I think, to.
I think that if he was bluffing, that would be a very bad look.
Yeah.
And I don't think that that's something he would do. That's just my gut.
Yeah.
That's just my gut.
I don't know him. I have a very good friend who has tried cases with him in California who says he is awesome, that he
seems to have it together.
He's got it together. He's as honest as the day is long. He's really hardworking, very smart. And basically takes no enemies. And he knows he's up against the most powerful force in the country. So with that, I haven't asked my friend whether or not about this DVD, but
we'll find out. Damn it, I want to know what's on it.
Yeah, but he said, Avenatti told Anderson Cooper last night in the interview. Yeah, if you think I'm bluffing, you ask all the people that I've represented and all the people who've done business with me and ask them if I'm the kind of guy who would bluff about anything.
So when do we see that stuff? That's what I want to know.
I don't know.
What are they hanging on to?
And I thought one of the most honest answers that that Stormy Daniels gave Anderson Cooper is basically, was this good for you?
You were 27, he was 60. Were you physically attracted to him?
No.
Not at all?
No.
Did you want to have sex with him?
No. But I didn't say no. I'm not a victim. I'm not.
It was entirely consensual.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Again, right. But I mean, just, was he attracted? No. Did you want to have sex with him? No.
She didn't have to think about that long.
She didn't have to think about that long.
Were you attracted to him? No.
No. And she says, I'm not out here as part of, I'm not the Me Too movement. He was not taking advantage of me. I was there I knew what I was doing. I'm a grown up. I'm a porn star. And she did everything she did willingly. She fesses up about that again, I think, which speaks to her credibility and authenticity. And in the meantime, yes, indeed, Donald Trump, who last Monday announced that he has a new lawyer who's going to represent him, Joe DeGenova from Fox News, whose main theory is that the FBI was out to elect Hillary Clinton president of the United States. They were on her team, and when she didn't win, then they tried to frame, that's Joe DeGenova's word, to frame Donald Trump for a crime he never committed. Donald Trump loved hearing Joe DeGenova say that on Fox News. He announced that he was hiring Joe DeGenova and his wife, Victoria Tunzing, to represent him in his dealings with Robert Mueller. And then he met them. And reportedly, he wasn't as impressed with them, or with Joe anyhow, in person as he had been on television. So yesterday they announced he's not hiring them after all. This is sort of, well, a Michael Flynn kind of thing, right? Although they never actually got the job.
Right.
But it's another thing of announcing I'm hiring somebody and then doesn't do it. They said it was because they had a conflict. The real story is got together and Trump didn't like him after all. So what this means is at the moment, the Robert Mueller investigation is going on, and Donald Trump has, because John Dowd resigned last week. He resigned because Donald Trump hired Joe DeGenova. One of the reasons, now Donald Trump has no lead lawyer to deal with Robert Mueller. And on top of that, Trump reportedly told people over the weekend that if he fires John Kelly, he probably won't hire any other chief of staff because he doesn't need a chief of staff.
Yeah, hell yeah.
He's his own chief of staff. Right.
Please let that happen.
Please let that happen. Oh, man, we're just getting started. Want to hear from you, your comments on Stormy Daniels. Do you believe her? At BP Show. We'll be right back. Reid Wilson joins us next from The Hill to help us through the news of the day and maybe some turmoil out in Illinois politically as well. We'll be right back.
This is the Bill Press Show.
Okay, friends and neighbors, listen, hope you're having a great day. Here's a way to have an even better day. Make your pledge and contribution right now to Free Speech TV. Keep Free Speech TV on the air. Keep this great progressive channel, the only 24/7 progressive television channel in the entire country. Keep Free Speech TV going. And you know how to do it. Pick up the phone. Give us a holler at 877-378-8669, 877-378-8669, or go to freespeech.org/donate. Make your pledge, make your contribution as generously as you can. And here's what's really exciting. We are now in the final week of our pledge drive for this spring, and we're pretty close, getting closer and closer to that goal. We just need you this week to help us get over the top. So please join in. And what we ask you really is to join all the people who have already given to Free Speech TV. And of course, if you have, then give again. And we call these people our regular supporters, the Builders Circle. So I want you to match the enthusiasm, match the generosity of those in the Builder Circle, who can be people who give anything from $30 a year to $60 to $120, whatever you can afford, all the way up to $1,000 or more. Give your matching pledge, make your pledge, and realize that these Builder Circles are there. They're sort of the foundation. So every dollar you give will be doubled by the dollars that they have given, and we can always count on. We want to join you, expand that Builder Circle, and build more and more support for Free Speech TV so we can deliver even more content every day. It's a great partnership we've told you about. The unique thing about Free Speech TV, nowhere else, is you are Free Speech TV. No corporations, no government money. You have to sit through any commercials for laxatives or other things or whatever that you see on the evening news. You just get the pure content on Free Speech TV, and you make it possible with your contributions. And of course, in return for hearing from you, you'll hear back from us with a nice little appreciation of ours for your generosity. So again, dig in, be as generous as you can, and know that what it goes for is keeping this strong progressive voice out there to refute and to rebut the lies of the Trump administration and to bring the American people the truth. This is where the resistance begins. This is why the resistance has been so successful, because Donald Trump, he can call it fake news all he wants. But what we're telling you is what's really going on, not the lies that we hear from the White House. Again, make your pledge today, 877-378-8669, or go online. Join our Builder Circle. Make your donation count at freespeech.org/donate. Do it today.
us on Twitter @BP Show. This is The Bill Press Show.
On a Monday, March 26th, 2 days after the March for Our Lives here across the country, and the big one here in Washington, D.C., and I was out there on Saturday representing all of you. We come to you live from our nation's capital, the Bill Press Show, our studio on Capitol Hill, where we're brought to you today by the United Food and Commercial Workers Union, the great men and women of the UFCW under President Mark Perrone, a proud union family that feeds, serves, and provides for America's hard-working families. We salute them, thank them for the support of the program. Find out more about their good work at ufcw.org. They're the great people that you would deal with every time you go shopping for any big grocery chain. The UFCW. Stock the shelves, check you out, and take good care of you. We thank them. What's going on? And looking across, we welcome here to the program. Reid Wilson is with The Hill, thehill.com. Talk to you about it often because it's such a great newspaper here covering both the Congress and the White House and what's happening in state capitals all around the country. And that's Reid Wilson's beat. Reid, it's good to see you.
Hey, Bill.
Thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
And also, Reid has a new book we're going to be talking about, too, called Epidemic, mainly about the Ebola crisis, but also how governments and whether they're prepared to deal with medical emergencies like this and how they perform. Yeah, we'll get into that. Peter, we've been at it for a while, Reid, so wanted to get some comments.
Don't forget, we're on Twitter @BP Show, @BP Show. We'll start with some comments on Stormy Daniels. David says she didn't blink at all. She was telling the truth in that interview, so somebody was paying attention to the body language during the interview. Edward, replying to your tweet that you believe Stormy Daniels, says, Bill, you'd believe Judas Iscariot if he had a D behind his name. Which I thought was a little mean.
That's mean.
Yeah. A couple of other comments. KG says the threats made against her and her child are what struck me about this interview, which, yeah, I agree with completely. And
by the way, somebody comes up to you in Vegas.
Yeah.
In a parking lot?
In a parking lot in Vegas and threatens you and your child and knows your name.
You should take it seriously.
Take it seriously.
You should take it seriously. One other comment about the rally this weekend, the March for Our Lives. Frank says the rally this weekend and the determination of these kids have given me hope in the Donald Trump era. On that note, we have put up a poll on our Twitter page @BP Show. Will the March for Our Lives change the political landscape in the 2018 midterms and beyond? Yes, no, or unsure is the question. Right now, we've got about 100 votes. We just put it up. 75% say yes, no. 75% say yes, 60% say no, 9% say they are unsure. So go get your vote on @BP Show on Twitter.
All right, put me down as a yes.
All right, we can vote for you. Sure.
All right. Reid, looking at the states, one of the themes that sort of was maybe weaving through, maybe not one of the principal themes of the March for Our Lives on Saturday was, they're standing in front of the U.S. Capitol where nothing has been done and nothing will be done under this gang. But there is movement, good and bad, at the state level.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah,
that you've seen.
Just a few days after the Parkland shooting, the Oregon state legislature passed a measure that would prevent people who've been accused of or who've been convicted of stalking or other domestic violence-related crimes from owning a gun. They bragged that they were the first to do anything, but there has been some movement in some of these states. We obviously saw the legislation that passed in Florida. Most of that was the quote-unquote school safety stuff, but at least they raised the age at which somebody could purchase a rifle or something like that. And I think there are sort of two things that are likely to make some headway here. First of all, raising the age at which somebody can purchase a rifle or something like an AR-15. And second, what are called red flag laws, where somebody shows that they are a danger to themselves or others, that they can have their guns taken away from them. John Kasich called for something like that in Ohio. He called for a whole raft of proposals, but it looks like that is something that could actually move. There are some other states that
they're
have
so innocuous. It's hard to believe that wouldn't be just easy to get. Right.
And yet, in the wake of Parkland itself, there were several states that had measures up within a week or two of the shooting that would have made guns easier to access. The state of Oklahoma repealed a bunch of requirements that people get licenses or things like that, training requirements. They made it easier for school districts to allow their faculty or staff to carry weapons on school property. Missouri has debated some measures like that. They actually had something that was coming up on committee like 2 or 3 days after Parkland, and they delayed it because they didn't want the protesters to show up at the committee hearings. But the thing that has struck me, speaking of committee hearings, is that at the hearings in a lot of these states, whether it's Florida or Missouri or Oregon or California is going to have a bunch of these debates, you see repeated references in local press about the need to open overflow rooms because so many people are showing up to hear the legislators and to offer their own opinion, both the pro-gun folks and the gun control folks. But people are clearly
so it has
interested
really touched a nerve.
It has, and in a way that that I don't think we've seen since Sandy Hook. But of course, in Sandy Hook, there was a cheerleader at the national level. There was one figure in President Obama who showed up and shed tears at the podium. We don't have that now. This is being driven by something else, by much more grassroots organizations.
That's an interesting point. I saw someone tweet it out on Saturday. I was walking home from the march, and I saw this tweet, and somebody was saying, I'm looking for answers, or does anyone have any theory on why after Parkland this happened and why it didn't happen after Sandy Hook?
Well, the difference is that 6-year-old kids don't speak out very much, and 17-year-old kids do.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, to me, that's the first big obvious difference, right?
And this is a difference that I think we're seeing in the electorate as a whole. Like, I don't want to minimize anybody from Parkland, but there is a generation now coming of age in the electorate that is much more sort of used to instant action. This is a generation that grew up on their phones. They grew up.
Good point.
If you want to donate to earthquake response in Haiti, you text something and $10 goes on your bill, and the Red Cross gets that $10. People are used to that sort of instant action, if you will. The people of the millennial generation and later, even basically the younger millennials and later. And I think that's going to manifest in two ways. First of all, the number of independent voters across the country is going to go up because this generation hates institutions, and there is no bigger institution than a political party. So they're not going to join the political party, but there is a massive gap there in their ideological views. This is clearly the most liberal generation that we've ever seen. Check out the generic ballot. I was going through the Pew did a great survey last week where they went through all of their 2017 polls, and they asked, they found who had leaned towards Democrats, who had leaned towards Republicans, and as you can imagine, the silent generation is the most Republican. The boomers are about evenly split. Gen X is about evenly split with a little tilt towards Dems, and then among millennials, it's like 59% D and 32% Republican. So this is the most liberal generation that we've ever seen. They are the largest generation in the American workforce right now. They're not yet the largest generation in the electorate because younger people don't tend to vote as much as older people do. But if they get off their butts on Election Day and show up, they're going to have a big impact on the midterms.
The other thing I forgot when we were talking about the March for Our Lives earlier, a point I didn't make at the time, is what struck me too. I mean, the fact that all the voices that we heard from were from young voices, that the message was so single focused on gun violence. It was not all these, as you often see at rallies, where all kinds of different issues come up, right? Climate change and all, which are all important issues, but this was focused on one important. And then also the universality of it. I mean, it was black, it was white, it was brown, it was Asian, it was gay, it was straight, it was young, it was old, it was everything. I mean, it was almost like, okay, what slice of America would be for gun violence, right? And it was that was so powerful. Back at the state level for a second, isn't this? I mean, they've always called it, and I spent 4 good years working for Governor Jerry Brown in his office in California, first time around, that the states, they call them laboratories of democracy.
Right. Louis Brandeis.
Is that it? Mm-hmm. But today, it's really proven true, isn't it? With the Congress doing nothing, if there's action on, by the way, on climate change, on health care, on guns, it's happening and other issues in the state capitals.
Yeah, and we have 7 states that are totally controlled by Ds, that is the Democratic governor and state legislatures.
The trifecta?
Yeah, the trifecta is right. I think we're at 25 states controlled by Republicans, and, I mean, they're experimenting. And, you know, the funny thing about this, and this is why I love covering this thing, California is going just about as far left as you could possibly imagine. Texas is going just about as far right as you could possibly imagine. And you know what? They're both doing okay. So something is working in those 2 states. Their overall economies are actually doing okay. At the same time, you've got a state like Oregon that's going pretty far left and a state like Kansas that's going pretty far right, and they're in real trouble, both of them. So something is not working there.
Why is Oregon in trouble?
Oregon has a massive budget hole because of some pension problems, some education issues that they've got to fund and things like that. They're going to have to find north of, I think last time I checked it was like $1.6 billion to fill their budget hole. So something's not working there. But, I mean, look, you
they could borrow from California.
And that's, okay, so let's talk. So I find Jerry Brown endlessly fascinating, and you worked for him. Did you ever see, by the way, the hole in his carpet? Gray Davis told me, his first chief of staff, Gray Davis, told me this great story that in the first couple of months of his first term, there was a hole in his carpet in the governor's office. And one day, Davis said to him...
I'm sure. I've walked over it. I've seen it. I'm sure hundreds of times.
At one point, Davis apparently told the governor he was gonna have a new carpet brought in and fix the hole. And Jerry Brown said, whoa, don't do that. Because every time a legislator comes into my office and says, hey, I need more money for this, I point to the hole and say, look, if I can't fix that, I can't fund the program. So it was useful. He is a fascinating case study in that, you know, he has this image of being... the crazy Governor Moonbeam, right? That columnist in Chicago gave him the nickname. And by the way, the columnist regretted giving him the nickname through the rest of his career. But he's got this image as the super liberal guy. He is the most conservative person in the room in most of the negotiations in Sacramento, which is fascinating to me. And he came into office the second time with a $25 billion, $26 billion budget hole. He's going to leave office with a $4 or $5 billion surplus.
Yeah, absolutely.
And a rainy day fund that is absolutely full.
Yes.
That's remarkable.
Right. And Donald Trump says he's doing a lousy job of governing.
Well, and as we talk about states being the laboratory and the experiments, California is going to experiment with single-payer health care coming up probably when a new governor gets elected.
It has a ban on assault weapons, and it's had for the last 10 years, I think.
And in the wake of Parkland, they introduced like 12 new bills right away to get something done. But also, they're experimenting with things like high-speed rail. One of Jerry Brown's legacy projects is this high-speed rail project that's going to connect the Central Valley to L.A. and San Francisco eventually. And at a time when President Trump likes to talk about how we've got these fast trains in Japan and China, where ours, well, California's giving it a try. So there's one example of just the states experimenting. And the thing that I always say is what happens in the state capitals today is going to happen in Washington tomorrow.
Absolutely. And what happens in California today is going to happen across the rest of the country tomorrow. And someday... I've got lots of stories too. I'll tell you my stories, Jerry Brown. So I used to tell him that, Jerry, you're not conservative, you're just cheap. When it came to a lot of stuff like that. But anyway, in terms of how governments are doing, that's sort of the focus of your book. Again, it's just comes out tomorrow, called Epidemic. And you base this on the Ebola crisis, but I sort of forgotten about the Ebola crisis.
Yeah.
It was pretty scary.
It was terrifying
for a while, to the point that President Obama appointed as Ebola czar, right?
Ron Klain. Ebola czar. He was
former Joe Biden's.
Joe Biden and Al Gore.
Al Gore's
both
chief of staff, and then also Joe Biden's. But what did you find when you're looking at how we responded to the Ebola crisis?
So this book, Epidemic, Ebola, and
how many were killed in this country?
It was in this country, one.
Just one. In Atlanta, right?
No, he died in Dallas.
Oh, Dallas. Dallas. That's right.
But he came in. Right. And there were a couple of nurses infected in Dallas.
Yes,
a couple others who had served over in Liberia, Guinea, and Sierra Leone, who came back and got the disease. And I talk about a couple of them. There are amazing emotional scars that come with even surviving the Ebola virus. It's a truly terrifying thing. But basically, I talked to the folks, everybody from Ron Klain to Tom Frieden, who ran the CDC, Anthony Fauci, who's the head of the National Institute of Allergic and Infectious Diseases, Raj Shah, who was heading the USAID, and folks from the World Health Organization and everywhere else. And I asked them, are we ready for the next one? Because the next one, it's not a question of if we'll have another epidemic that becomes becomes a pandemic. It's a question of when. Because of the way the world is changing, human society is moving out into areas that we've never been before. Our cities are expanding. The population is growing. At the same time, we're becoming denser. Climate change is increasing the tropical and subtropical zones, so these bugs are...
So they're bringing bugs and diseases that we've never thought of before.
Right. Well, that's the reason Zika showed up in the U.S. is because suddenly these certain mosquitoes that that used to live only in a narrow band in the tropics started moving north.
Right.
And by the way, we also have this booming middle class in Africa and Asia, which is traveling more, which means there are more vectors for some virus to get out of wherever it might be contained. The difference between all previous Ebola epidemics and this one is that all previous ones happened in very remote villages in Central Africa. This one happened in an area where there are 3 cities of more than 1 million people with direct flights to Europe and Asia and the Middle East and not quite the U.S., but close, one stop away. And that's the point, is that everybody today is one connection away from New York or Beijing or Calcutta or anywhere like that where something like this could fester. The next one, it could come from, the jungles of Africa. It could come from a bird market in China. And there are some flu strains going around China right now that really scare some epidemiologists. But the fact is, this was our moment to try to learn how to combat one of these viruses. And we learned a lot of lessons. The World Health Organization was woefully unprepared to do anything about this, burdened by politics and bureaucracy and the fact that they just didn't have any money. American organizations like the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention really stepped up in a way they never had. In previous outbreaks, the CDC had really patted itself on the back for dispatching a dozen or 24 virus hunters to go and contain an epidemic. In this case, they dispatched 1,400 people to West Africa. Wow. And then we sent in another 3,000 American troops to build medical capacity. Now, in a sense, we got lucky that this outbreak happened where it did. The United States effectively created Liberia back in the 1800s when we repatriated is the wrong word, but we sent a whole bunch of former slaves back to Liberia, which caused a lot of its own problems. Nothing is perfect, but the bottom line is the America's approval rating in Liberia is something like 99%. They love us, and therefore the arrival of 3,000 American troops was a blessed event. Imagine if this had happened in Pakistan or somewhere like that.
Right, we couldn't have done it.
The 101st Airborne would have had to fight its way in before they could fight the virus, as opposed to being welcomed as heroes.
Right. So Ebola's gone, is it?
The Ebola outbreak in West Africa is over. There is a vaccine and now new methods of treatment, so we'll never see an Ebola outbreak of this scope again. But what worries people is the next one.
So, and who will be in charge in the next one? Didn't Trump cut funding for the World Health Organization?
He hasn't cut funding for the World Health Organization
yet. But for the UN?
Well, he hasn't
proposed it at any rate.
There are certain programs in the UN that he hasn't funded, money for Palestinian refugees and things like that, but nothing specifically to the WHO. The fact is, though, the WHO has been underfunded for decades, and it's not a Democratic or Republican thing. I mean, the Obama administration didn't fund WHO enough, and effectively what we do is we keep our funding level at previous years' levels. Well, inflation changes that, and they need the actual funding to keep to sort of keep an eye on the next.
So they are and should be the lead agency for the next epidemic.
That would be ideal if we had one global body in charge of overseeing all of these particular things and all of these potential outbreaks. But we do have sort of agencies that are like the CDC in a whole bunch of other different countries. And one of the fascinating things in this book is that the Obama administration worked real hard with China to get China involved in the disease response. And the Chinese version of the CDC was really interested, and they wanted to know how to build an Ebola treatment unit and how to safely treat any of these patients and things like that. And part of the reason, twofold reason. First of all, China is growing in its influence in Africa, and one of the things the Obama administration wanted to convey was with becoming a superpower comes responsibilities in handling and responding to disasters in other countries around the world. And the second part is there is a real serious concern that the next pandemic will be some kind of influenza, and a lot of influenzas start in bird markets in China.
Yeah. So the book is Epidemic. Reid Wilson is the author. Reid, the health policy area that I've suddenly heard a lot about and become interested in, and if this is something that you didn't treat with in the book, just say, fine, we have to talk about it, are these superbugs or the abuse of antibiotics.
Right.
There was a big article in the New York. I led a panel discussion on this, believe it or not, in Las Vegas about a month ago. Big article in the New York Times on Saturday. Louise Slaughter, Congresswoman who just died, this was her big issue in Congress. 80% of the antibiotics sold in this country are used in livestock, not in humans, in livestock. And what's developing by that is all these superbugs who are immune to antibiotics. And so antibiotics are becoming less effective dealing with diseases with humans because of this abuse, particularly in poultry and livestock.
Right, yeah. And the World Health Organization...
And that creates, opens the door to all kinds of...
and which, by the way,
epidemics.
All of your listeners, if you've got an antibiotic prescription, you take all of the pills, because if you don't kill everything, whatever survives is the thing that can be resistant.
Yeah.
So the World Health Organization, every year they come out with their list of effectively diseases to watch, and Ebola's on the list, and so is Lassa fever and things like that. They have also added something just recently called Disease X, which is the one that we don't know about, and that could be a disease-resistant or an antibiotic-resistant disease. It could be another hemorrhagic fever. It could be an influenza. Whatever it is, they're now planning for Disease X.
Ooh.
Which is a nice. Maybe I'll title that my next book.
Right, man. I don't know. I do have to ask you, because I saw your piece about talk about states and what's going on at the state level. Illinois. They've got the last big, powerful political boss in the country.
So I wanted to make the comparison to Tammany Hall, and I kind of think that's fair, but Michael Madigan is the Speaker of the Illinois State House. He is also the chairman of the Illinois Democratic Party. When were you chairman in California?
93, 96.
All right, so he became chairman just after you left.
Yeah, he wasn't chair when I was.
But still, the guy's been chair of the state Democratic Party since 1998, so 20 years.
Yeah.
He has been the Speaker of the House for all but 2 of the last 35 years. He is the single most powerful political boss in America today.
He's Boss Tweed.
He almost is. He almost is. And when you talk to Democrats in Illinois, even the ones who are predisposed to oppose the old machine politics, they'll never talk on the record. They're very careful because he is so powerful there, and they fear incurring his wrath. He, however, has a bit of a Me Too issue. Not himself. He has not been accused of any improper behavior, but 2 staffers in his very powerful political organization have been accused of rampant harassment, and his response was the response of a 75-year-old guy who doesn't understand this sort of generational change taking place. So Mike Madigan is fascinating. The Illinois politics at large are fascinating. Chicago politics even more fascinating.
And Epidemic is fascinating. The latest book out by Reid Wilson, out tomorrow. Available all the places you get your books, Amazon.com or whatever. And we'll have a link on our website. And thank you, Reid Wilson.
It's the Bill Press Show.
I wanted to find a bank with a purpose. I wanted to find a place that would take my money and not use it to cause the financial crisis, but to fix the financial crisis and to help end income inequality.
The people that we employ are usually clients right off the streets. They don't have an account, but Amalgamated is willing to get that started for them.
Their reputation supporting the working man, I think, speaks for itself. This is a bank that cares for their customers, and I appreciate that.
We were able to access a construction loan through the bank's programs, and that loan has helped us house 28 families in the community.
Amalgamated is a bank that was started for and about working people.
Many of our customers have a deep commitment to advocating for social and economic justice. We share that commitment, and we're not afraid to stand up and say that we need to change some of the way that the country does business.
giving you everything you need to fight the Trump administration. This is The Bill Press Show, live at youtube.com/The Bill Press Show.
I believe Stormy Daniels. What's the whole thing? Credible to me, no doubt about it. She's telling the truth, and Donald Trump is not. Hello, everybody. What do you say on a Monday, March 26th? How good to see you. Hope you had a great weekend. It was a busy weekend. An incredible experience on Saturday to join the March for Our Lives here in Washington, D.C. They're calling it probably the largest ever one-day political rally in the history of this country, in the history of this, our nation's capital. And then yesterday, Stormy Daniels heading off, we'd all look forward to that interview, and 60 Minutes gave it a whole half hour last night. And we'll cover that and a whole lot of the rest of the news of the day with all of you. That's why we're glad to have you with us. You know how to give us your comments by going on Twitter at BP Show. Let us know what you think about the news of the day. Got a great lineup of guests, and joining us this half hour, the head of the great organization Media Matters for America. I've been praising and working with Media Matters ever since they were created. Angelo Carusone here in studio with us, president of Media Matters. Angelo, good to see you.
Nice to see you as well.
Was this the biggest ever 60 Minutes television audience last night? Do we know
it was
yet?
Certainly a really big one. I mean, the last time I think there was this much hype for it was actually on the right wing side when they pushed that really big Benghazi story that turned out to be a total bust, if you remember.
Oh yeah, yeah.
That was the last time that I saw a similar buildup. Although it was obviously all phony, and they got burned pretty bad.
They got burned pretty badly on that,
they did.
right?
Yeah, I think they learned their lessons though.
Indeed. Anyway, good to have Angelo with us. Good to have you with us. We'll dive into the news of the day, but first,
this is the Full
Peter
Court
with the
Press.
headlines here.
You got it. Just a couple of other stories making news. Well, this is a little scary. At the end of last week, NASA announced that there is an asteroid heading straight for Earth.
Another one?
Yes.
Duck and cover.
September 22nd, 2135 is when they expect this asteroid.
2135?
2135.
I definitely won't be
So
there.
117 years away.
Oh, okay.
So it's a Thursday, by the way, in case you're making plans. To make sure, I double-checked. It is a Thursday.
Yeah, way to ruin a weekend.
There's an asteroid a third of a mile across. They've named this asteroid Bennu, and they say it will slam into Earth with an impact energy equivalent to the currently deployed arsenal of U.S. nuclear ballistic missiles. But don't worry, NASA has a plan. They have been working on different exercises to figure out how they could stop this thing. So they are either going to ram into it or target it with a nuclear device if it looks like it's actually going to strike us. Because, again, if it's an asteroid that's a third of a mile wide and it comes barreling into a place like, Washington, D.C. or New York City, that can cause a lot of damage. So they're trying to figure out how to blow it up or move it or just get it the hell out. They got 117 years to figure it out, Bill.
Right. Good. I'm glad somebody's on this case. I am not going to worry about it.
Yeah. You shouldn't worry about it too much. You shouldn't worry about it too much. By the way, whatever you think, this next story, do not get excited about. This is not a happy story. Remington, Remington, the oldest gun manufacturer in America, has filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. They did this yesterday. They said that because of slumping sales, they are going to, which is
That's
weird.
Still hard to believe.
It was hard for me to believe.
That's probably because they're not making AR-15s.
Yeah, fair. They founded the company more than 200 years ago, and I really honestly can't think of a better exclamation point to put on the weekend of the March for Our Lives than to have the oldest gun manufacturer in America say that they have to file for Chapter 11.
I know when I saw that this morning, that's my first thought. Boy, that march was more powerful than we thought.
Exactly. We have our first casualty here of
I wish there were.
Yeah.
I wish there were a connection.
Yeah. So again, they've been around since 1816, and they have to file for Chapter 11. So. Good riddance.
It's too bad there are not more, and some of the ones again making the assault weapons are not doing that.
This is the Bill Press Show.
Yes, indeed. The morning after the big interview, I believe Stormy Daniels. What do you say? Hello, everybody. Great to see you today on a Monday, March 26th, the Bill Press Show. Here we are. Joining you online across this great land of ours on YouTube, youtube.com/The Bill Press Show. Joining you on television, coast to coast on Free Speech TV. Great to see you out there in TV land. And out in the greater Chicago area, the progressive voice of Chicago, WCPT. Welcome, welcome. Hope you had a great weekend. Now get ready to dive into the news of the day on this first day of Holy Week. Angelo Carusone, the president of Media Matters for America, joins us in the studio. Angelo, it's always good to see you.
Likewise.
Thank you again. And I always tell you, Media Matters, MediaMatters.org. Check it out. The one greatest source for exposing the lies we hear from the right-wing media and from the current administration and the president of the United States. Boy, so much to talk about. But let's start with the interview last night. I do think that she didn't blink. She was very credible.
Yeah.
Came across authentic to me.
I thought so. Completely so. I thought she was really, completely authentic, transparent, and absolutely credible.
You know, at the very end, Peter, that very last clip I thought was maybe at her most honest, where she said basically she wasn't trying to pretend to be anything other than who she is. She's very honest about that. And that she didn't really like this guy, but she still went along with it. Here's Anderson Cooper right at the very end of the interview.
You were 27, he was 60. Were you physically attracted to him?
No.
Not at all?
No.
Did you want to have sex with him?
No. But I didn't say no. I'm not a victim. I'm not.
It was entirely consensual.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So she had pretended otherwise.
Yeah.
You would have seen through it, right?
Oh, completely. I think that because I don't think that she set out to even try to draw this sort of attention to herself. I do think that she largely set out because of the fact that they were lying about her. And, given his platform and the fact that, the lies actually could end up, I think, feeding a larger narrative that he was trying to push out there, she was willing to defend herself. And that's largely what the impetus for push. This is not easy for her. I mean, I don't think that in any way she gets anything out of this. I mean, she talks about the fact that it's boosted her a little bit, but the damage isn't worth it. I mean, even she was, I think her argument about her family was pretty real and legitimate too. So.
Yeah, I mean, Anderson pointed out you might get a good book deal out of this, and I think she probably could. But she also said people could turn against her because of this too.
Yeah,
right?
Without a doubt. Yeah, it cuts both ways. I mean, there was a huge risk and liability. Of the public perception side of it, just putting every time when you're not in the political space, anytime you taint your profession with politics, there's an enormous risk, and almost always is there a downside to doing that.
How about the fact that she admits she denied 3 times in writing that she had an affair with Donald Trump?
Yeah, I think the argument for why she did that makes a lot of sense too. One, I don't think we can discount the intimidation and the harassment factor. I mean, the idea that Trump's people, associates or others, threaten not just legal action, but other forms of violence is real. She's not the first person to make these kinds of claims. I don't think we can discount why you would just want that to go away. And so I think her reasons for why she just said it, swept it under the rug, and it just wasn't a thing for her is fair and legitimate. She owns that.
Right. The one thing that struck me also, another thing that struck me about her is. I think see if you agree, that I believe, in a sense at least, Donald Trump has met his match. He is the master manipulator of the media.
Without a doubt.
For self-promotion.
Yep.
He has met his match in Stormy Daniels.
She absolutely understands the media. She's extremely media savvy. She really does get it in every meaningful way.
Right. It must drive him freaking crazy.
And there's one thing that his approach is to consistently oversell, and that's what gets the conversation. That's how he sort of primes the pump to sort of get the conversation going. And she's a little bit on the opposite end of the spectrum, which is that she's not overselling this stuff. Mm-hmm. She's not inflating salacious events. There's some parts of it that are, I think, automatically tantalizing, but she's very mindful not to make it seem more extreme or exaggerated than it actually is. It's a very different approach, but ultimately the same capabilities.
And the other side is always trying to undermine people and find ways, to question their credibility, I guess. So one argument I've seen raised against her is, who's she representing? Who's she fronting for? Who is paying for her multi-million-dollar publicity campaign? My take on that is, I don't think anybody's paying. I don't think. I mean, what's the cost, right? I mean, 60 Minutes didn't pay her. For that,
right. She's not. She's
right?
Certainly on the PR front. She's not paying some big firm to gin this up out of nothing. The media rightfully is reaching out to her because there's a story there, and she uses her push to social media helps reinforce that and continue to build that narrative. That doesn't require a PR firm, and she doesn't really get anything out of this personally. The only thing that which they haven't pushed on because I think it's somewhat credible.
So maybe she had the cost of a plane ticket to New York.
That's it. Yeah, a lot of it she's paying for herself. And, as it relates to, especially early on, the idea that there might be a protracted litigation or even, before they sort of moved on this front, the idea that you'd get a GoFundMe or a public campaign for people to put donations so that you feel comfortable enough to engage in that fight. When Donald Trump threatened to sue me, I did the same thing.
Whoa. Donald Trump threatened to sue you.
Yeah, $25 million. A couple of years ago because of a campaign that I was running, and 30 days. I didn't do anything for 30 days while I, basically got commitments and support and legal support to make sure that if I proceeded and he sued me, that I had enough resources to continue to defend myself. So, and that's why I don't think there's anything nefarious there, because even if he did do it, I needed to spend all that money. I wouldn't have gotten anything out of it. Still would have been a nightmare.
So he was running for president then?
It was right before he ran for president.
And you were at Media Matters?
I was still at Media Matters, and I was acting in my personal capacity to get him fired from Macy's. And it was
from Macy's?
Yep. And
because they were selling his products.
That's right. And there was a really serious partnership there between the two of them, and especially in the realm of promotion. And the campaign really took off, and it obviously bothered him quite.
But this was
a bit.
his deal, wasn't it? He had hundreds of lawsuits going, right? This was to anybody that got in his way in any way. He threatened to sue them.
Oh yeah, and Michael Cohen. I was doing a radio show once. Michael Cohen called in randomly and just started berating and attacking me. And of course, the radio host put him on the air. But I mean, we got into this. But I mean, this is so none of the stuff that she was saying last night was all that surprising. They sort of swoop in. They make these really grand gestures. Michael Cohen was on the phone with reporters constantly trying to attack my credibility, and he was saying I signed the petition myself 700,000 times, things like that. So I mean, I think they operate with, to your point, the same standard playbook. It's this overwhelming sort of force, or at least the perception of overwhelming force. So, at least as that's the only area where I could say, hey, they're lining up all the support for her, but she doesn't get anything out of it, and it's just to make sure that if this does go forward, there's enough there.
What happened to your lawsuit?
He sent a bunch of tweets one night. 3:30 in the morning that completely contradicted everything that his lawyers were saying, and the next morning, they basically gave up.
They dropped
They had to. I mean, it just for months they were saying one thing, and then he woke up in the middle of the night and tweeted a bunch of stuff that was 100% contradictory.
That seems to be a pattern, by the way.
I know. I was just going to say that's the playbook.
His lawyers seemed pretty exasperated at the whole thing because they had been pushing it for months. This idea that there was real meaningful damage, and then he woke up and said the ties were selling more than ever thanks to me, and all kinds of other stuff, which was also not true, but it didn't matter. He couldn't sustain the lawsuit at that point.
Right. So you're and Michael Avenatti, her attorney, last night, I thought also came across as
great.
A guy I'd want on my side.
Yeah.
Sure.
He is very capable. I mean, he really understands visual aids. I mean, he was debating Michael Cohen's attorney a couple of days ago and brought up this picture of him, and he's very mindful about that part of it. I think they're both really savvy players.
Do you believe that Michael Cohen paid Stormy Daniels $130,000 out of his own pocket with Donald Trump knowing nothing about it?
No, not really. No. Definitely not. Or I just don't. I think that he was just too invaluable and too in sync, and nothing over there happened without Trump knowing it, and that's how things operated. So, no, I don't.
And we'll see. I don't know what the next step is in the Stormy Daniels thing. But then also there's Karen. By the way, it's a great parallel between Karen McDougal's story that she told Anderson Cooper last Thursday and Stormy Daniels' story in terms of his MO and
that's right, really
taking
similar.
them both to Trump Tower.
That's right. I mean, it's the same. I mean, because that for him, the thing about Trump is he is really proud of a few things and not many things. I mean, that's the thing. He really goes. So at the time, if you go back, he would always talk about Celebrity Apprentice's ratings. He was really proud of that show.
Oh yeah.
He was really proud of it. And even though he had all these other things, that was something that he had great pride. You don't really see him other than that big show that he did, during the campaign with the Trump steaks and the Trump wine stuff.
Right.
He wasn't really proud of Trump wine, but he was really proud of his of the NBC Apprentice, and he's really proud of Trump Tower. Right. The location, the fact that he has 2 flagship stores in there, Gucci and Nike. He talks about because they're not just stores; they're like headquarters kind of things. I mean, they give him a great sense of pride. He always goes back to them. They're his standby. So it's a cycle and a pattern.
From a media point of view, there's been nothing like 60 Minutes, has there? I mean, in terms of
it's the gold standard.
It really is.
It really is. Yeah.
For how many years now? I don't know, but and they keep. SNL up and down and whatever, but 60 Minutes has just been steady.
That's why it was so dramatic when they messed up that Benghazi story. And it does show the issues of media concentration because the guy that they were promoting was somebody that CBS's book publisher, he had the book for, and so it was kind of a synergy in terms of and I think that in that one instance when they scaled back some of their editorial standards in order to let this go through, it was because of that. But that instance was such a big deal in part but for the fact that CBS had ran with that story, this dramatic thing about the contractor running in the opposite direction, and no one else would have given that story any credibility or credence. And but other than that, really one meaningful flap, there really just isn't anything close to it. They just do the best work and the best vetting.
Media Matters for America, MediaMatters.org is the website. Angelo Carusone, the president. You've been doing a lot on your great team at Media Matters on this whole flap over Facebook. Yeah. How could this happen? As Jeff Zuckerberg says, I'm very sorry. Yeah, well.
I think that
the private data on 50 million Americans that they knew people were taking it, didn't they?
They did,
they knew, and they didn't follow through with how they were using it. Right,
and I think that's the part that's really at issue here is that people gave this data to this research company, like they do for a lot of the apps that they sign up for, and that's something that Facebook and other platforms need to make more accessible and easier. But people also need to manage that themselves to an extent. People just click the terms of service button; they don't pay attention. That said. What the app developer did was give that, because the app developer was really Cambridge Analytica in disguise. They posed and propped up this phony research operation to get access to this information. And then the app data gave it to Cambridge. They made a copy of it, basically, which they shouldn't have done. So when Facebook turned off Cambridge's access to it, fine. The thing that concerns me, and this gets back to the how did this all happen, is that, one, there's pretty clear evidence that there's copies of this exact same data set elsewhere. Whether it be with Trump's super PAC or with his own campaign.
Or have it with the John Bolton super PAC.
Exactly, because of the fact that while many of them were using the services, some of them were actually going so far as to integrate their databases. And that's where the difference starts to come in, that they actually have copies of it that are still in use. So that's one thing. How it happens is really ultimately the big story of how fake news and disinformation happened in 2016, which is that on the one hand, Facebook has an effort to mollify some of their critics and weren't proactive enough. And on the other hand, they just kept getting duped. So, when they fired all of the human editors after that story that they were censoring conservative content, there was a threefold increase in the reach of fake news. For the first time, it exceeded the overall reach of all of real news sources combined. Just from that one change overnight. Trump's suppression campaign would have never been able to happen if they didn't turn it over to an automated approval process instead of human advertising people that are reviewing that stuff. And it was all, one time and again, they just kept giving in.
So when you say the fake news expanded its reach or extended its reach, what are you including in that umbrella? I mean, like Breitbart or
no? I wouldn't even include Breitbart. I would consider Breitbart to be hyper ideological. So I think in order to be fair, when I say fake news, I mean 100% fabricated content, where the source is, like the story yesterday with the Parkland student ripping up the Constitution, but it's not the Constitution. It was Photoshop. Like that's fake, total fabrications. There's not even a kernel of truth in there. there's a clear network of fake news purveyors.
Who's putting it out there?
A lot of times it's individuals that are not ideological at all. That they're going to these message board communities, they're looking for stories that are getting the best traction, and then they're writing it up to get traffic because they make $5,000 to $10,000 a post from some of this stuff. I mean, real traffic was being driven to these websites during the 2016 campaign. And so, but if you look at the numbers, prior to Mark Zuckerberg making that change in May of 2016, the reach, the overall amount of people that were exposed to this was pretty stable. Once he made that change, a lot of this stuff started making its way into the trending topics sections on Facebook, which meant more and more people were seeing it. And it just spills over. And the threefold increase almost overnight.
How are they getting $5,000 to $10,000 a post?
So most of them actually use Google AdSense to monetize. And the traffic from these places can be extreme. So it's not every post, but the viral ones. But we found a.
But I'm not. This is not my long suit, but because we've talked about, and I guess we have some Google ads or have had. I'm not really sure.
We have in the past, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, you don't get a lot for a Google ad. You have to have a huge amount of traffic.
That's right.
For it to amount to any real money.
Totally.
Right?
And I think that one thing that I think, and this applies everywhere, is when we went back and did an analysis of the Facebook pages, which are the really ones that really push traffic. We made the cutoff at 1 million, and then we coded them. Mainstream, left-leaning, right-leaning. By just doing that, we found a 2.5 times asymmetry. The aggregate size of right-leaning Facebook networks with pages in excess of 1 million was 251 million. The aggregate size for all mainstream, including entertainment, was 247 million.
Including entertainment.
That's right. And the aggregate size for left-leaning pages that pushed 100 million. So even that alone, that asymmetry is very significant. And if you go down the chain, so if we included that to be 500,000, it would be way different. So the one thing that, especially because of the way the filter bubble plays out, but ultimately the right wing has an enormous distribution advantage.
So they have taken over the social media?
In some communities, yeah. I think YouTube in particular, it doesn't feel like it is, but absolutely. There are a few top influencers on YouTube that really are either mainstream or left-leaning, but after that, when you start going down, it's just a cesspool of right-wing or sort of the new right or men's rights advocates. They wouldn't even necessarily define themselves as conservatives, but I put the men's right community in the same bucket.
So YouTube taking over.
It's like talk radio for young people, basically, is how I think about it. And same with Facebook.
Facebook also.
That wasn't always the case. What happened is after the 2012 election, conservative donors gave a bunch of money to Brent Bozell and a couple others, and they just started building up these Facebook communities. The idea being that, look, we need to organize our people so we can drive traffic. Maybe we can help, influence reporters' coverage a little bit if they think that they can get traffic from us. But a lot of that really is what kickstarted it, this process of shifting the balance. And then, you couple that with the fact that there's this culture of just trolling, harassment, and abuse on the right. Increasingly, people on the barrier to participation on the left keeps going up. Every time I post something about this, I get blowback. You just don't do it over time.
Right.
Yeah.
So what does the left do or is it too late, to kind of... But it listening to this reminds me of, I wrote a book, Toxic Talk, about what happened to talk radio.
That's right.
They went out and bought all the stations, bought the network, and they dominated. I mean, way dominated the number of right-wing talk radio shows.
It's exactly parallel to what you talk about in your book.
Yeah.
It totally is. It's just a different medium, but it's ultimately the same tactics that were employed. And then the subject matter and the content of the programming, in this case the content, then has an effect on the culture, on the people who are consuming it, which then becomes a feedback loop that reinforces that structural imbalance. So what I think
What's ironic about that is when Donald Trump says fake news, there really is a lot of fake news out there. It's just not coming from the people that he's accusing.
That's right.
Of fake news.
I mean, what it is it's a and that's where I think the big shift for me has come in, is that this is disinformation that is fundamentally anti-democratic and dangerous. But there is a large network out there, and that's the reason why it worked is because of the imbalance on talk radio and Fox News for all these years. I mean, the audience itself was primed to believe that Barack Obama banned the Pledge of Allegiance. So when you see a post that says that, you want to click it, because if they had not been consuming that kind of content for a decade. When they saw that post, I don't know, it wouldn't have had the same resonance. Hillary Clinton murders another person. I don't know if they would have been like, oh, yeah, that sounds credible, if they weren't hearing it day in and day out from talk radio and Fox News.
Totally. They created the climate, the atmosphere where that was sell. So what does it say, or what does it mean when we have a president whose entire administration is basically driven by Fox and Friends in the morning?
It's scary.
But it's also true. I mean,
it's
right?
completely true. I mean, we've tracked it where he live tweets it. He sometimes we could see if he's watching.
Matt Gertz did that great study of watching Fox and Friends and Donald Trump's tweets for 6 months or something.
That's right.
That.
And
God bless him.
It's insane. I mean, it really is. It tracks so neatly with where with what he is tweeting out, because he's watching the segments, and you could actually see what time he woke up, how much of a delay he's on. It's that precise.
This non-veto, right?
Right.
Last weekend was on Friday. Fox and Friends in the morning. They're critical of the spending bill, which he's poised to sign. They've announced that he's going to sign it. Mick Mulvaney comes in the briefing room and says the president's fully behind this. He sees criticism of it on Fox and Friends in the morning. They said, "Damn it, I'm not going to sign that turkey."
That's right. That's exactly what happens. And because he wakes up and he's watching it, and he wants to respond, because he is really, I think, and if you're Donald Trump, the one thing that I think why Fox and Friends matters so much to him to a degree is that is really how Donald Trump became someone who could have an appeal to conservatives. I mean, he did a regular segment with Fox and Friends every Monday for years. And prior to that, he was just another Hollywood phone, occasionally in studio. Prior to that, he was just another Hollywood liberal billionaire, who had he was a tough guy who fired people, but they really were the ones that let him go up there and talk about politics to the conservative audience and really give him the Fox News stamp of approval. And he really does see Fox News, and in particular Fox and Friends, as having is being sort of like the single largest overlap with the core of his constituency. And he thinks if he loses Fox and Friends, then it means that he's lost the zeitgeist of his own people.
I am amazed that he hasn't hired Andrew Napolitano as his legal advisor.
I am a little bit surprised about that as well, to an extent. I think that he's always on a list for some appointment, but I remain I think it would be tough for him to get there in some capacity. Napolitano has disagreed with him on some of the constitutional authoritarianism stuff, which I think makes it a non-starter. I was really surprised when they first talked about D.G. Giovanni, because he's been a Fox News regular, but he's actually somebody that they have been pushing to be the second special counsel. And so that's why I was very surprised that he was like, well, he should join my legal team, because I always assumed that if they were going to go down that trajectory, that's who he would have ended up appointing, because it's the Fox News favorite for the second special counsel.
Right. Well, we don't know what happened. To Geneva, by the way.
To Geneva.
You were giving it probably
I was giving him more Italian than
you were giving him the official Italian
right.
pronunciation, but he and I went to high school together, so I did go to Geneva. But he apparently, when Trump liked him on television, and when he met him in person, he didn't like him, didn't like him so much. So it doesn't always work, right?
No, right, because it's TV, it's fake. I mean,
so he hasn't learned that yet.
Right? No, he hasn't picked up on that.
I remember the late Bob Novak at Crossfire. People always used to ask me, is Bob as obnoxious in person as he is on TV? And of course, I would say yes, and he loved that. That was part of his reputation. But we've never had anybody, certainly in the presidency, who's so media driven.
No.
I mean, and wouldn't be there without the media, right?
That's without a doubt. They own this, and the cable news in particular owns this, in the same way that they own the Iraq War. Honestly, and that the lead up to it, they really built it and pushed it in a way that was wildly inconsistent with any editorial or journalistic standards. Was self-serving and reckless.
Not to mention, it had nothing to do with the truth.
That's right, and right, exactly. It had nothing to do with the truth.
No, the whole thing about the build-up, the nuclear weapons, the smoking cloud, I mean, all that.
And it's the same thing here. I mean, so they just replicated a very similar set of mistakes.
Wow. That is
That's something.
That is hard to swallow and
I'm
walk
not sure
away
what it
from.
is, but it's
that
something.
The media owns the Donald Trump administration the same way the media owns the Iraq War.
Yeah, I think that's how I look at it. That they may have sort of recovered a little bit, and there wasn't really another big major. You could always have criticisms, but in 50, 100 years from now, when we look back right before the meteor hits us, those will be the two things that I think it will be undeniably owned by cable news and the current media.
Media Matters for America. Again, Angelo, great job. Thanks so much for coming in today at MediaMatters.org. And Eliza Collins joins us next from USA Today. Talk about what train wreck we saw on Capitol Hill last week with this spending bill. We'll be right back.
Download our podcast, search for The Bill Press Show on iTunes, and remember to rate, review, and subscribe. This is The Bill Press Show.
Okay, friends and neighbors, listen, hope you're having a great day. Here's a way to have an even better day. Make your pledge and contribution right now to Free Speech TV. Keep Free Speech TV on the air. Keep this great progressive channel, the only 24/7 progressive television channel in the entire country. Keep Free Speech TV going. And you know how to do it. Pick up the phone. Give us a holler at 877-378-8669, 877-378-8669, or go to freespeech.org/donate. Make your pledge, make your contribution as generously as you can. And here's what's really exciting. We are now in the final week of our pledge drive for this spring, and we're pretty close, getting closer and closer to that goal. We just need you this week to help us get over the top. So please join in. And what we ask you really is to join all the people who have already given to Free Speech TV. And of course, if you have, then give again. And we call these people our regular supporters, the Builders Circle. So I want you to match the enthusiasm, match the generosity of those in the Builder Circle, who can be people who give anything from $30 a year to $60 to $120, whatever you can afford, all the way up to $1,000 or more. Give your matching pledge, make your pledge, and realize that these Builder Circles are there. They're sort of the foundation. So every dollar you give will be doubled by the dollars that they have given, and we can always count on. We want to join you, expand that Builder Circle, and build more and more support for Free Speech TV so we can deliver even more content every day. It's a great partnership we've told you about. The unique thing about Free Speech TV, nowhere else, is you are Free Speech TV. No corporations, no government money. You have to sit through any commercials for laxatives or other things or whatever that you see on the evening news. You just get the pure content on Free Speech TV, and you make it possible with your contributions. And of course, in return for hearing from you, you'll hear back from us with a nice little appreciation of ours for your generosity. So again, dig in, be as generous as you can, and know that what it goes for is keeping this strong progressive voice out there to refute and to rebut the lies of the Trump administration and to bring the American people the truth. This is where the resistance begins. This is why the resistance has been so successful, because Donald Trump, he can call it fake news all he wants. But what we're telling you is what's really going on, not the lies that we hear from the White House. Again, make your pledge today, 877-378-8669. Or go online, join our Builder Circle, make your donation count at freespeech.org/donate. Do it today.
This is the Bill Press Show.
Indeed, on a Monday, March 26th, the Bill Press Show, live from our nation's capital, right here in Washington, D.C. Great to see you today. Thank you for joining us. We're coming to you live from our studio on Capitol Hill. brought to you today by the International Association of Firefighters. Those great men and women of our firefighting departments that we count on every day. They never let us down, protecting American families every day under the leadership of President Harold Schaitberger. And we salute them, thank them for their support of the program. Congress is out of town this week and next week, I believe. Eliza Collins, that means she's got the next 2 weeks off.
Not quite.
She covers Congress for USA Today and joins us in the studio. Hi, Liza. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
You can go back and tell Susan Page that I told you that you've got the next 2 weeks.
Yeah. I'll be, thanks. I'm actually going to go to town, Susan. So
Bill
said
Press
it's
said I
fine.
could.
Yeah, exactly. Although our hours are better when we're in recess. No 1 a.m. votes, which is what we had last week.
Yeah, no, that's pretty good. So, they wound up with this big spending bill, and they thought they had a deal with the Donald Trump to sign the bill, and then Donald Trump wakes up Friday morning and says, "I'm not going to sign that stinker."
Exactly. That's exactly what happened. And the day before, the White House had kind of fanned out all their surrogates because, of course, this is a really massive bill that Republicans didn't really like, especially fiscal Republicans. And Trump had kind of given them cover.
Wait a minute. Are there any more fiscally responsible?
There
Are there
are
any more deficit hawks?
The Freedom Caucus guys, they did not vote for this bill because they said it was very expensive. Now you can make the argument they did vote for tax reform, which cost about the same amount, or will add to the deficit about the same amount. They have their reasoning. But they needed a bipartisan group to get this over the edge because of these fiscal conservatives wouldn't vote for it.
So it would not have passed without Democratic votes, is what you're saying?
Yes, definitely not. It had, I think, a majority of both parties, but there were significant chunks of both the right and left that did not vote for this.
So what did Democrats get out of this deal?
They got a lot, actually. They did. They do. The big
both
thing...
Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi said that there was a good deal.
Exactly.
Right?
Well, overall, this is a massive spending bill, and it had a massive bump in military spending, which is what Republicans wanted. But Democrats got a huge bump kind of in response in domestic spending. And for a Republican majorities and a Republican president, this was pretty significant. They got opioid funding. They got veterans funding. They also got a lot of different things like, Trump got $1.6 billion for border security, but he can't use any of it for a cement wall. Or ICE got more money, but he can't do agents. So they kind of, even Republican wins. They can't get interior agents, enforcement agents. It has to go towards sort of more internal payroll stuff.
Right, okay.
So even Republican, quote unquote, wins, Democrats were able to have a say. They got the Gateway Tunnel, not all of it, but they did get money to start funding that.
And they didn't get DACA.
They did not get DACA, and that is not a win for them. That is a big deal.
That was sort of the number one thing, right? This is the third or fourth time there's been an opportunity to either shut down the government or not have a bill or whatever because there's no DACA in it. And yet, once again, they said, okay, well, what's the status of DACA now? I mean, the deadline, the artificial deadline that Donald Trump gave them, March 5, came and went. And DACA still limps along under the status of they can take renewals but no new members. Is that what it is?
Exactly. So lawmakers basically say it's not as urgent anymore because the court is saying that it can keep going. What advocates say is, it can keep going for the people who already have it, 690,000. But there are a chunk of them who kind of just got caught in bad timing. Their statuses expired before it came back. We're not sure how many, but there are people who are just stuck in limbo right now. And then, of course, there's like 3 million undocumented immigrants who came to the U.S. as children and did not qualify for DACA because they were either too old when it started or, DACA was under 16. There's a whole bunch of people who were under 18. And so, advocates say this is actually not enough of an excuse, but that's what lawmakers are kind of using at this point. Democrats are hoping to say it's not urgent enough that we could shut the government down again. I'm not sure how that argument plays.
So was Donald Trump ever serious? As we talked with Angelo Carusone in the last half hour, he's watching Fox and Friends.
Mm-hmm.
It's very similar to that last December with the FISA bill.
Yes,
where
yes.
they were going to vote on it that
he
day.
tweeted.
He was totally for it. And then he watches Fox and Friends, and Andrew Napolitano says, I don't mind Trump supporting this thing, you know. And then Trump tweets out, this is a terrible bill, right?
Right.
Just the day before the White House had announced his support for it. So this is the same thing. He's watching Fox and Friends. The spending bill, which Mick Mulvaney came in the briefing room, told us he's going to sign it.
Exactly.
He supports it. And then the next morning he tweets out that he might veto it. I mean, what happened on the Hill then? I mean,
well, they
must
were
have
all
gone
out.
nuts.
Well, they were all home
they were out.
because
That's right.
they thought he was going to sign it. They thought. So the day before the House had passed it, they all went. Actually, Friday morning, they went to Louis Slaughter's funeral. So the House was not only not there, but they were all somewhere else. That was, this sad event, not trying to deal with actually very bipartisan community. The Senate very last minute voted at like 12 something midnight, and they went home. They had Codels, and so everyone was gone. So the Hill was quiet, well,
Paul Ryan, didn't he run down to the White House or call him? I guess.
I think he called him, although he could have gone over. But I think there was a real panic. I mean, Mike Pence, Ivanka Trump, the day before were fanning out at events saying, "Here are all our wins." And even that morning, I had actually gone to the White House for a meeting and just trying to talk to folks there. I'm like, what's going to happen? And everyone was sort of like, we'll just talk about it later. Like, I don't think anyone knew he had surprised them, similar to the FISA thing. He woke up and decided he heard that he didn't get enough wins on immigration, I think is really what it was on the wall. And
if he had not signed it, the government would have shut down.
Right. And that nobody was there. And Congress is weird in the way that, like, you can't just call a vote from afar. People can't call in.
No,
they need to show back up. So some of these people that set off for foreign countries have to turn around and come home. And there's no way all of that, all the paperwork, all the rewriting of whatever they needed to rewrite, negotiating, the government would have shut down.
And by the way, there would have
Too
been...
bad he didn't.
I know. No, I was secretly hoping that he would. I mean, I know it would suck for the shutdown
for a lot
purposes,
of people, but
there would be no way to get around the fact that this would have been a Trump shutdown.
Right.
You can't blame it on the Democrats. You can't blame it on the Republicans in Congress. You could only blame it on Trump. Full stop.
Which, by the way, somebody at the White House must have said, hey, Dodo, you can't do this. So here's why, right? Because you're right, it would have been totally his baby.
Right. Well, and his argument was interesting because he said, I'm shutting it down because there's not enough wall money and there's not a solution for DACA, which let's not forget, the DACA is his self-made problem. He ended that program.
Right.
And so he's been using this all along. Democrats don't want to fix it. And you could argue that Democrats aren't fighting as hard as maybe they've said they would to fix it. But that doesn't mean Trump offered one plan. It was not, Democrats felt it was not a fair plan.
Right.
It's not like he's been offering all of these options and Democrats are sitting there with their arms crossed.
No, right, exactly. I mean, so DACA's working. He breaks it, busts it up, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not broken until he says, I'm going to throw it to Congress and give them 6 months to deal with it. And then once it's there, then he uses it saying, okay, you want to restore this program?
Right.
Then give me $24 billion for my wall, right?
Right.
Uses as a bargaining chip for his wall.
And the other thing is there is I've been covering this DACA issue in Congress. There is a lot of overlap in both parties where they agree, but Trump will kind of scuttle things. So they get really close. Remember the Gang of Six, bipartisan deal. And then Trump decides he doesn't like it. And then they come. And so Trump has all along been scuttling these plans. And this was another offer. There was a back and forth with the Democrats negotiating. Trump wanted $25 billion for his wall, which is the full amount he wants in exchange for 2.5 years of legal protections for people, the DACA recipients, so not that broader group. And the Democrats said, we'll give you $25 billion, but we want path to citizenship for that group. And White House said no, so both sides said nope, and that just was not in the bill.
Right. And also when he announced, he didn't sign it publicly so much, right? He had signed it, and then he just showed it off that he had signed it or something. But he did say, I'll never do this again.
Right.
Nobody had a chance to read this bill. It's only 17 hours old.
Right.
Which was really sticking it to Paul Ryan, right?
Right.
Who did bypass regular rules, regular orders. You know, that old chant about read the bill, read the bill. They just rushed this
you
thing
could argue
through.
it wasn't just Paul Ryan. It was all 4 leaders who sat in the room and decided
That's right.
they're going to push
That's
this
right.
through.
Good point.
That was
Yeah.
a bipartisan messing up the, you know.
Yeah.
But it was fascinating.
Is there, some people speculated that they really rushed this through because they felt that they had to get out of town before the March for Our Lives.
I was in a press conference with Mitch McConnell where he was asked that. I mean, he didn't address it, but I'm sure that was an underlying thing. I think they had to get this through because the government shut down at midnight. I think that is number one. And because it looks really bad that we've had so many CRs, we've had a government shutdown, and here they've had 5 weeks with a framework. They knew how much they could spend, and they still were going out to the wire.
Right.
But I don't think that it was any reason to stay for Republican lawmakers to know that, you know, nearly 1 million people were going to come and demand something that they do not stand for.
So what sense do you have that this movement, what the Parkland students have been able to stir up around the country penetrates Capitol Hill and these congressional Republicans particularly at all? It was very powerful to be, and I was there right in front of the stage Saturday, to look through the stage behind those speakers
the Capitol.
Was the United States Capitol.
Right.
And every one of them had that message. Peter, maybe let's just with what David Hogue, that second clip where he talks about the message for politicians.
When politicians send their thoughts and prayers with no action, we say no more. And to those politicians supported by the NRA that allow the continued slaughter of our children and our future, I say get your resumes ready.
That, and then every time that they would chant, vote them out, vote them out. And there they are standing right in front of the Capitol. You know, it was very, very powerful. Did that message reach the House office building and the Senate office buildings?
I don't think it cannot reach them. I mean, I think that some of these really conservative lawmakers are not going to be touched by this. But I do think, especially senators, where you represent a much larger portion, a whole state, and not some small gerrymandered congressional district, you've got to be feeling it. I mean, we're seeing Marco Rubio is feeling the heat. How he's responding is kind of all over the place.
If Marco Rubio were running for re-election this year, he would lose.
He would be in trouble, I think.
He'd be in trouble for sure.
And we're seeing, I mean, the governor of Florida, who is likely going to run, we're seeing, I mean, he signed a bill that raised the age on buying weapons. This is someone with an A from the NRA. They're noticing this. And some of these House districts that are suburban, that Hillary won or Trump won by 1 point, they've got to be feeling the heat. And we talk about...
I think that's where it's going to be felt most, in the suburban Republican districts where mothers and...
the
moms are saying, damn right I want our kids to be protected.
And we've talked about this a lot. Suburban moms, white married women, tend to vote Republican, but not necessarily because they feel very strongly about Republican, but, you know, their husband might vote Republican. And I've been told taxes and terrorism. They're worried about sort of providing enough for their family and taking care of their family. And during 2016, ISIS was a huge issue. Trump talked tough on terrorism. Now guns, that's terrorism. And these moms might not be very hard for them to suddenly switch. They're already frustrated with the president. They're already frustrated with the partisanship in Washington. And now people are saying, let's just have some common sense gun reform. I think to watch the white married suburban woman in these districts.
In 2018.
Mm-hmm.
Right. You were up in Pennsylvania 18?
I was.
And Connor Lamb, now officially the winner.
Right. Took a little while.
And he's in until what? November.
And then he's running in his new district.
He's not running in the same district.
Not running in the same district because Pennsylvania, it was ruled that their districts were unconstitutionally gerrymandered. They were redrawn. And while Pennsylvania is definitely a purple sort of swing state, right now there is a disproportionate number of Republicans in office for how many Democrats are in the state. And so it was redrawn. And now there's a real chance that if Democrats win all the seats that they could win, kind of looking at the different numbers, it could go about half and half.
Which is kind of what the party registration is in Pennsylvania.
And that's a chance for Democrats to pick up a lot of seats. And so Conor Lamb won the 18th district. The 18th district, as we know, it will be gone. It'll be much smaller, and it'll be called the 14th district. It'll be very Republican. So it's expected Rick Saccone, who lost, will run for that district.
Well, such a great candidate.
And then his party would agree with you on that. They were quick to throw him under the bus. And then Conor Lamb will run in the 17th, which is where under the redrawn map he lives. And that's much more competitive. There's currently a sitting Republican there, but it'll only be like R plus maybe 2 or 3 points, which is a lot more of a competitive race. So he has a chance, and he'll be a congressman-elect. So it'll be 2 incumbents running against each other.
Oh,
he'll be a congressman at that point.
At that point,
yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So
he'll be a member of Congress at that point.
So he'll be running against Keith Rothfus.
He's got to be sworn in. He hasn't already been sworn in, right? I mean,
no, I think imagine after recess, because remember Rick Saccone didn't even concede until the end of last week.
Yeah, and I think that officially the 4 counties didn't finish their count of absentee ballots until then. So
because it was only like 600 votes.
By the way, I hate to bust. I just want to read because Donald Trump is tweeting this morning. He didn't tweet at all about the Stormy Daniels stuff yesterday. He didn't tweet at all about the March for Our Lives, but he did tweet this morning, just a couple moments ago. So much fake news, capital letters. Never been more. I'm shocked he spelled this correctly. Never been more voluminous or more inaccurate. But through it all, our country is doing great. Now, he doesn't specify if that's about Stormy Daniels.
Yeah, I was going to say, what fake news is he complaining about now?
It could be about a lot of things.
Right, his cabinet, he now has one lawyer representing him, right? The New York Times reported it could be Stormy Daniels.
I'm sorry, though. I cannot really wrap my head around the fact that he spelled voluminous correctly on the first try.
Well, there was an article recently about how many errors he does have in his tweets, so maybe he's taking a little bit more time.
Particularly the misspelling.
Right,
yeah.
maybe
he constantly misspells stuff.
Well, I would imagine there's a thesaurus or a dictionary around the White House somewhere.
I mean, he's got autocorrect on his phone, and he still misspells stuff.
I know.
So, I don't know. I mean, I hear you. Maybe he's taking another step.
Well, I wouldn't. I put too much stock in it that this is to do.
Yeah.
No, but you do wonder, what is he talking about in terms of fake news? Is it that there's going to be a shakeup at the White House? I mean, the fact is, when you talk about disarray at the White House, in the last few weeks, right, he has fired his Secretary of State, his chief economic advisor, or they've fired or walked out, his chief economic advisor, the national security advisor, Hope Hicks, his communications director, two of his top aides.
Yep. Josh Raphael's another communications director. Ivanka and Jared's communications director.
Is that right? He's out.
Yeah, he left as well.
I mean, so it's been constant turmoil.
Right.
And everybody expects that David Shulkin his head will roll this week, and then John Kelly, his name keeps. Nobody says that he's on solid ground.
Right. And that's the problem with this White House is with many of those people you mentioned a week or two before, there was reporting so-and-so's probably out or on the outs, and the White House comes out and says that's not true, that's wrong, Trump tweets that it's incorrect. I love Rex Tillerson or whatever. And then a week later, they're gone. And so it's hard as a reporter to take much stock into what they say. And it's hard, I think, as an American to watch and feel confident that things are how they say they are.
Yeah. In fact, I was remembering this weekend that last year at this time, the meme, I guess, right, that everybody was saying, the common wisdom was, okay, Trump's sort of like out of control, but there are 3 grown-ups around, so don't worry, right? There's Rex Tillerson, there's H.R. McMaster, and James Mattis. Remember that? We talked about that.
Yeah.
So
there were
only
these
one
3
stays.
grown-ups that would keep him in line, right? Well, guess what? 2 of them are gone.
And I think people threw Gary Cohn in there often as well, because at least with trade and things like that, Gary Cohn was like free trader, not a...
Okay. Well, he's gone too.
Right. So just throw another one.
3 out of 4 are gone.
Right.
And some people are worried that with John Bolton coming in, that Mattis could just say, "No, I'm not going to put up with this guy, who's just wild and wants to use military anywhere on the planet. He hasn't met a country yet. He doesn't want to invade." John Bolton, right? That Mattis just might say, "This is not. I don't want to be part of this." Don't know. But at any rate, right now, 3 out of 4 are gone.
Right. And not to mention all the other people who are gone. And it's hard to want to hire for that White House, I'd imagine. It's not like people are jumping to go. Especially, I think about like replacing Hope Hicks. I mean, they've got to hire from within, I imagine, because who would want to go do communication strategy when the president has his own communication strategy?
Well, look at the problem that he's having getting a lawyer.
Right.
I mean, he's hired every major. I mean, he's interviewed every major law firm in the city, and nobody yet has taken up his offer. Nobody wants, and so he hires Joe DeGenova and Victoria Tunzing. He announces a week ago today, and then over the weekend he says, "No, I changed my mind. I'm not going to hire them after all." They didn't even get in the door, right? They didn't even get their.
Yeah, I wonder what that was about. But.
All kinds of speculation. That when he met Joe in person, that he was not as impressed in person as he was by watching him on television.
It should be pointed out, by the way. It should be pointed out, by the way, that Joe DeGenova has facial hair, and we know how much Donald Trump hates facial hair.
Could have been that.
Joe has the mustache.
Yeah, well, John Bolton.
Yeah, I was just going to say, but he just hired John Bolton.
That's fair.
John Bolton hasn't shaved his yet, has he?
No.
Okay, so back to your regular beat on Congress here. Some people said, I mean, I've heard it said that, okay, so they passed and he signed, reluctantly maybe, the big spending bill. Is that it for Congress this year?
Well, why?
Major legislation. Last year they had one bill, which was the tax cut.
Right.
The entire year, one bill. Is this their one bill for this year?
I can't see many other bills making it. I think they'll see some bipartisan small little things. I think you'll see some small infrastructure pieces, but I don't imagine there'll be a big
There's not going to be $1 trillion infrastructure plan.
And the other thing that's tough is...
I know. Maybe they'll pass a big bill dealing with climate change.
Yeah. Jump on that one.
Yeah, jump on that one.
And the other thing is even something like, I don't know, maybe some infrastructure, some bill that maybe they could get bipartisan support, although I think that'd be really hard, would be in the Senate that would be giving red state Democrats a win. And Mitch McConnell is very aware of giving red state Democrats something that they can say, we worked with Republicans, we worked with President Trump on, and so then that sort of in some way gives them a pass for not voting for tax reform or health care. So there's a real... trying to keep these red state Democrats from getting wins. And then in the House, protecting these vulnerable members they're very vulnerable. And of course, you're seeing conservatives just furious about this spending bill, furious at their leadership, calling, they want to repeal Obamacare again, which will not happen.
It could very well happen that this is the one major bill that Congress will pass this year, and they might as well take the rest of the year off because they're not going to get anything done.
Well, and we think we saw, after the Pennsylvania election, to bring it back to that, Rick Saccone could not fundraise. He had a very difficult time fundraising. Right. He raised some money, but not close to Conor Lamb. And so Republicans are now going out and saying, you need to be out there, you need to be campaigning, you need to be fundraising. That takes more time. That's time they're not here.
That's time they're not here, right.
Bills.
All right, so enjoy your next 2 weeks off.
Thank you.
Alyssa, thanks so much for coming in. You follow, of course, at USA, usatoday.com. Don't forget, folks, out in the Chicago area, April 4 at the Frugal Muse Bookstore in Darien, Illinois, talking about my new book, From the Left, Life in the Crossfire. Have a great Monday. Come back and see us tomorrow.
This
we'll be looking for
is
you.
The Bill Press Show.